Hey guys, welcome back as always, my name is Lazar, and today we're gonna have a short recap on Dante Unbound, the latest Warframe update that should be delivered to us in the month of March. Starting with Dante himself, the brand new Warframe, the 56th Warframe. He has this whole librarian theme to it, / historian. He's gonna be coming with an exalted tome. If you love tome weapons, the one of them we got, this one is gonna have an exalted one named the Noctua. And yes, you heard that right, and I don't mean the computer fans. Of course, he's also gonna have an alternative helmet, Tiandana, and armor. That's not all, however, we're also gonna be getting two incarnate weapons, the Ruvox and the Onos. Now, the Onos is a grenade launcher that goes full-on arm cannon in incarnate mode, and how cool is that? As for the Ruvox, this is essentially a fifth weapon that has a coin thematic. Basically, each time you strike your enemies in glorious combat, you'll hear the sound of coins. Ka-ching, ka-ching. Oh, and in incarnate form, it goes full-on claws mode. Two brand new game modes, Entropy Disruption and Deep Archimedea. Entropy Disruption is basically kind of Disruption 2.0, that's the way they put it. As for Deep Archimedea, this is the one I'm really excited for because it has been described as something over Netra cells. Something like a difficult sortie with actual difficult modifiers and a fantastic reward at the end. We're also going to be getting Stanax Deluxe and more importantly, Inaros rework, baby. Finally! It only took how many years of asking, but Inaros is finally going to be getting that rework. More details in a bit. 10 brand new Warframe augments, which look kinda interesting, Tenogen and Ascent Fusion. Now really quick so I don't have to go back to this one, the initially announced we're gonna be using 4 normal shards to make 1 Tau Forge. They're gonna change that. From 4 we're gonna go to 3 to make a Tau Forge shard. Not only that, the Archon shard weeklies are gonna be moving over to the Entrati from Call, which is definitely fantastic from my point of view since Call missions, in my opinion, have never really been all that Warframey.
A couple unique things I would say about him as well. He does have a universal aura. He'll be using his book and all his abilities, but first one being summoning the Noctua. This is an exalted weapon. And another trait as well about the Noctua, there's no restriction on the number of tome mods.
So as you go in, the first thing you'll notice is he has that book on his HUD. So Megan can pull out his one, and you can use Noctua as an exalted weapon. This has, you can also do an alt fire that's kind of like, you know, you'll build that up as you're hitting enemies and you'll deal status damage. This is pretty much a classic exalted weapon. And you don't actually need it out to do the rest of his abilities, so you can put it away if you just want to focus on casting his verses. So this is very, you know, book themed, and once Megan succeeds, yeah, there you go. So if you press his second ability is called Light Verse. So you're casting Light Verse, and as you can see, the page filled in, which means you can start building out a combo. So if Megan pressed Light Verse again, she now has a complete story. So if she presses her 4, she's going to cast Triumph, which is his kind of first story he can cast. So if she wanted to change up the vibe, so if you maybe do let's do 2 dark verses.
You got it.
So Megan's gonna cast dark first, so you can see that's creating like a really visceral slash. Any enemy caught in the cone is gonna get hit with damage. And then she can press 4 to do tragedy, which is his story.
I've lost my mouse, Rue.
Uh-oh. It might be over on the other computer monitor.
Help me.
But yeah, so the idea is that you're building a story with Dante and you're queuing up the combos you want. So you can do 2 light verses.
Thank you.
You can do 2 dark verses. You could do a light, then a dark. So 2, then 3.
Would you like a light and a
Let's
dark?
do a light, then a dark.
Can we get a 2 and a 3?
This is Word Warden.
And there we go.
And then if you cast this, you get a copy of Noctua, which you can see kind of just floating there. So you get a floating energy book with you that will attack targets of your attacks with your weapons. So if you're hitting with primary, melee, secondary, your copy of Noctua will bam, 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 hit those enemies. And then if you do 3, then 2, this is Page Flight, which will allow you to summon 3 Peregrines that will distract, draw aggro, and issue some slash procs on enemies. So you basically get 3 spectral Peregrines to keep enemies targeted. And yeah, those will be up. The idea is that you're rotating some of these buffs as you're in the course of casting his spells. So this is Dante. You're classically, when you're rotating between the 3 and the 2, the game's going to care about the last 2 that you cast. So if Megan does like light verse, then light verse again, but then a dark verse, the Dark Verse will take the spot of the Last Cast ability. So realistically, what you're dealing with here, he will read you to death, not quite. But if you want to keep yourself and your allies, healed with some Overguard, you'll be casting Light Verse a lot. And if you want to do damage to enemies in front of you and get some slash procs out there, you'll be doing Dark Verse, which is that X, that cone of slash procs. And you can see the enemies hit in the field get sort of the Dark Verse orbiting around them on cast. So this is Dante. He's got all 4 of his final verses that you can cast with your combos. You're using your light and dark verses to create whatever you need in the moment, whether it be if you're desperate for health and you need all those light verses and you want to cast Triumph, you can get some regenerating survivability stats. And then there's a pretty big the tragedy ability. If you do dark verse twice, will deal lots of damage, and enemies will suffer. Any procs they have just detonate. So it's,
they died.
They died. Yeah. So what are we going for with Dante? What's the vibe? It's all about flowing with telling those stories, being really, really versatile. Of course, his Exalted Book you can use for damage, status, all those good things, and you can cast your light and dark verses in the order you choose.
And that's pretty much it. Let me know what you guys think about Dante. Did you ever want a Laverian Warframe? To me, the actual gameplay showed on stream simply wasn't all that exciting, but the key takeaways are his helmet ability is his free ability. His 4 ability has 4 forms technically, depending how did you cast your 2 and your free. Did you cast 2 2s, 2 frees, or a 2 and a free, or a 3 and a 2? The light verse and the dark verse. Obviously, dark verse will mean damage, light verse will mean some sort of healing, and depending on the combination, because it does matter, only the last 2 you cast, those are the only ones that will be taken into account into your final cast or your 4 ability. So I guess that's cool, kind of combining stuff like that, a little bit reminding me of Lavos. I love the fact that he's got an Exalted Tome. Hopefully this one will be less disappointing than the other tome we got. As for his passive ability, the whole scanning thing, I mean, we do have Helios. On the other hand, against enemies which are completed in the Codex, you will get that extra status chance. To me, it simply doesn't look like something I ever thought Warframe would have, so it's either gonna be a smash success or forgotten like many other Warframes. Fingers crossed, it's gonna be a smash success. Now let's talk about the brand new disruption node, Armatus, which is gonna be down on Deimos. This is essentially Disruption 2.0. in the sense that they're only changing a couple of things around, hopefully for the better. And this is what we will be playing to get those fantastic Dante parts, the chassis, the systems, and the neuro. And I know the kind of player you are. Bruh, I get everything first try every time, hooey. But for the rest of us that don't hooey, there will be a pity system. You're gonna be able to go to Sanctum Anatomica, visit Lloyd, and buy parts directly from Lloyd with a brand new resource, because of course there's a brand new resource. Vessel Capillaries. I don't know, is it Italian? I don't know. Vessel Capillaries will be a brand new resource, and you're gonna need to farm a whole bunch to get yourself the parts for Dante. 30 for the neuro, for the chassis, and for the systems as well. As for the blueprint, a grand total of 60. So if we add everything up, 150 capillary, the brand new resource to get everything that you need for Dante. But wait, you also want the Ruvox and the Onos, get it? Oh no, I knew I shouldn't use that joke. Anyway, another 100 to get both of those weapons. So, grand total 250 to essentially get everything if you don't count the placeholders that say 25 and 25 for blueprint. It would have been nice if everything was 25. Just saying. A couple of more details include Demolish markers that show up earlier and the Gremlin or the Gruzling, because the Gruzling is Warframe's version of a Diablo Gremlin, will steal your stuff, because we really needed that annoying bloody mechanic in Warframe as well. In Disruption, the Gruzling will have keys. He also has important items such as Lantron, so it's gonna be, I guess, mandatory to kill the bloody thing. Yet another thing for us to kill in Warframe. Lloyd sells Dante parts and new incarnate weapons on those Ruvox. They also drop in the new Disruption. I think I already told you that, didn't I? Now let's talk about the brand new game mode, Archimedea, and this is the one I'm really excited for. You must have, listen, you must have rank 5 with a caveat to participate. So essentially, if you can change the colors of the rainbow, if you know what I mean, you're going to be able to access the deep Archimedea immediately. If not, this is your time. It is March, so it's your time to make sure you get rank 5 with a caveat. And I know it may be a bit annoying, but I honestly believe that this brand new game mode will definitely be worth it. Pablo described it as a hard sortie or something after Nitrocell, something that will really challenge us. So if you're a veteran and you got everything, it's finally time, my friend, to test your mettle. Though I'm even hesitant to say that, because every time Dee said something was hard, it turned out not to be very hard, so there's that to bear in mind. But how does it actually work, huh? Well, they show this splash screen, which to be honest, I think they were trying to make things confusing with it, but every single week you get 5 lockouts for Nitrocells. Yes, 5 attempts. You go, you do them, and then you cry in a corner after you don't get... Or is that just me? Not important. Essentially, you're gonna have all these modifiers, and the more modifiers you add, the more difficult the mission, the better the reward you'll get. Seems simple enough, yes? So you're gonna have incentives to use specific weapons, you're gonna have incentives to use specific warframes, and I can't wait for something like this, because you know what Sortie did back when we actually took Sortie serious, so I don't know, 6 years ago? 5 years ago? Years ago, is the fact that at times it had modifiers like, hey, use this weapon or this weapon type. We're finally gonna have a reason to revisit weapons that normally we don't really use, because, you know, they're not really all that good, like the Hiku. Who uses the Hiku? Add to that the usual restrictions like no consumables, no respawns, empowered enemies, etc. And this actually spells for a quite the interesting game mode. You know, when Reset comes around, we're gonna be able to go for this one. 2 deep Archimedea, and weirdly enough, only 1 Nitrocell, so it's gonna be interesting to see how this one works. And outside of the brand new Warframe, this is what I am most excited for. Pablo called it a more challenging sortie, and it's for sweaty gamers, a lot of modifiers. I don't know, I kinda take offense of the whole sweaty thing, but yeah. Next up, Styanax Deluxe, and when it comes to cosmetics, these are subjective and entirely up to you. What I may like, you may not like, so talking about cosmetics is a bit weird. What I can say is that I love the Aztec-y theme that this one has. The whole Montezuma thing. It's got a spear because he's Styanax. It would be weird to launch a skin without a spear skin. But in any case, to me, it definitely looks cool. Do you like it? Let me know in the comment section down below.
Hello. Gonna do a rundown of the Inaros rework. So let's start first with the hardest thing to do on Inaros, which is dying. I'm probably gonna have to fast forward to this. So almost there. There we go. So now you turn into a sand version of yourself that can attack enemies, and you can see that meter on the center, and basically that kind of shows you how much you're reviving, and boom, you're back up. So basically it's based on the amount of hits that you do. Every time you die though, that the amount of hits it takes to revive grows more. So basically if you die a lot, it's gonna get harder and harder to come back. But if you don't die for a while, the number starts going back down, so you basically can't recover. And his first ability works mostly the same, so you still do the Sandstorm, and then that opens enemies for finishers, and those finishers with your passive heals you, so you heal back. And that's pretty much how it's always worked. The main thing that changed for this ability is more not on Inaros himself, but around Inaros, which is basically that we're making those finishers available to more enemies and making it so it's more consistent, because right now there's a lot of enemies that you can try to do those finishers and they don't work. So in the patch they'll start working, and that doesn't only benefit Inaros, but it benefits, you know, Ash and anyone else that can open enemies for finishers. For his 2 and 3, we kind of combine them, so now it has the mechanics of 3, so it's basically the Whirlwind, but you can cast it much faster. It's limited duration now, so instead of a drain, it just lasts a certain amount of time, and it's faster. So you can see here, I basically can move quite a bit faster in there. And most importantly, it drags enemies to be right below you. So since it drags enemies to you instead of tossing them all over the level, then you can after that do a ground finisher on them. And because you have your passive that heals you, you basically get a lot of heals from those ground finishers. And also, some of the benefits from the old second ability are now part of the third. So you can see when I cast this, I'm actually invulnerable, and I'm healing for every enemy that's within the range of my Whirlwind. I am healing a little bit. So if there's a bunch of enemies, you just go in, Whirlwind them together, and that heals you, and then they drop at your feet, and you start doing ground finishers on them. So you can combo that pretty nicely. So his 2 and his 3, we kind of merged them. But for his 4th, we did actually something weird, which is basically we split it in 2. So now you have the armor part as his 3, and you can see it here. So basically when you tap, you charge, and then you can see in the lower right, you get a little meter for the armor. You can move now while you cast it instead of being static like it was before, so that helps a lot. And the benefits from the augment, which protect you from status, are now embedded into the ability. So basically, whenever you take a status, instead of actually suffering the status, you get protected. Let me see if I can find. Yeah, so for example, these ones would give me corrosive. If I stand on it, you can see my armor went down, but I did not get the corrosive. And it gives you protection for a certain duration, so it doesn't get consumed super fast. So that's basically the tree. Now, the augment, which used to give you the status protection, now it gives you dead protection, which it's a little bit of a twist that we made there. Essentially, it's a shorter cooldown than any of the other dead protection augments we've done before. But after the invulnerability from the protection ends, you actually get hit with a slash proc. And that slash proc can kill you if you don't heal fast. So it synergizes really well with, his finishers or his 2. Obviously his 2 makes you invulnerable, so you don't take damage from the slash, and also you can heal by getting close to enemies. So basically, it's a dead protection that then you have to actually do something about it, because if you don't do something about it, the slash will kill you. So that's his 3. And his 4th gets the swarm part of the previous 4, but quite amplified. So let me show you. So when I cast the 4, you can see they get swarmed, and then that swarm can spread around. Essentially, it CCs them, and any enemy killed during that swarm will actually create a sandcat. The sandcats are bugged right now in this demo, so sadly I cannot quite show them to you. But basically what they do is they attack enemies, and they also swarm those enemies. So they keep kind of spreading that CC around. And it can be really effective to kind of keep entire rooms kind of controlled with the swarm. The old swarm used to do 1 corrosive hit at the very end. Now it does it every tick. So that means it can also be used as a pretty effective way to shred armor, essentially. So to recap, when you die now, you turn into a sand version of yourself that can revive by hitting enemies. The 1 is mostly unchanged. The 2 and the 3 got merged, so now you get the whirlwind. It's much faster. It heals you. It gives you immunity. And then gathers enemies instead of throwing them around. His 3 is what used to be the armor part of his 4th. Now you can move while you cast it instead of being stuck in place. It has the default, the status protection by default, so now you'll be protected from any status as long as you have that up. His 4th now is the swarm part of that, and basically it casts now into a cone instead of into a single unit, and basically all those units get swarmed, and then that swarm can spread around CCing enemies. It can strip armor, and any enemies that die during while they're affected by swarm will create a sandcat that will assist in spreading that swarm even more. I hope you like it, and I hope we'll get it into your hands soon. Adios.
So what are the key takeaways from all of that? On death, you turn into a sandstorm. When you die, you must do a lot of hits to revive. If you don't die often, the number of hits goes down. So essentially, if you die all the time, you'll have to do a whole lot of hits. Eventually, you will meet your final kaputski. So don't suck and don't die. I sound like a mobile player now. His ult 2 and 3 are not combined into his 2. Invulnerable on cast, fantastic. Moves fast, heals on hit, pulls enemies underneath him for ground finisher. His 3 gives armor, you can move while casting, protected against statuses. The augment now gives you death protection, but you get slash at the end, heal fast, so you don't die. And finally, his 4 ability, it's gonna be a frontal cone effect, and enemies killed while under the effects of swarm will spawn sandcats. They didn't show us sandcats because apparently the model was bugged, so there's that. The kiddies will be attacking enemies and spread swarm. Crowd control swarm now does a corrosive tick every tick, so that's fantastic. The damage of his 4 will now scale with Inaros' health, and essentially that's kind of the key takeaways of the rework. To be honest, it doesn't read or even look that great as something like the Hydroid rework. Now granted, Pablo did say we're not gonna tune up Inaros as much as we did Hydroid, simply because Inaros still actually has some role to play in Warframe, because he can survive passively up until level 200, 300, something like that, depending on the build. But I'm talking strictly gameplay wise, it simply didn't feel all that great, especially considering the thematic of Inaros, the whole Egyptian mummy thing that he's got going on. I was expecting a lot more than this. Hopefully it's gonna play a lot more enjoyable than it looks. Next up, 10 new augments. Yes, my friends, 10 brand new augments, which are delish. We're talking about Styanax, Loki, Neja, Baru, Chroma, Yareli, Nidus, Citrine, Lavos, and Kullervo. Now, of course, if you're a whatever main, you're gonna be more excited for that specific Warframe. For me, hey listen, I'm not the biggest Yareli fan, in the sense that I still think she's the most garbage Warframe in the game. Sorry, Yareli fans, shit happens. But This augment, Loyal Merulina, might actually turn everything around. I love what they did with this one, and in my humblest of opinions, instead of making this an augment, this should be part of her base kit and how she would actually work. Just leave Merulina do things around me and give me the option to ride her. That sounded really dirty, but that's not the point. Give me the option to actually use her as a key drive, or not when I'm in tight corridors. That would have been fantastic. Still, don't look a gift horse in the mouth. I love what they're doing with Yareli, and I think it's the first time. Now, I'm also a bit of a Citrine fan. I still believe she is one of the most amazing supports in the game. Now, granted, she's a whole lot more active to play than something like your most favorite support in the game. Yes, I'm talking about Wisp. But overall, I do believe she brings more to the team than Wisp. Of course, it's gonna depend on what exactly you're doing, which would be your ideal support for your team. But you can always use both, which I do enjoy. As for Recrystallize, I gotta be honest with you guys, I never removed any of Citrine's abilities simply because I believe she is a fantastically balanced frame straight out the gate, and Recrystallize will essentially just reinforce her full ability, which is absolutely amazing. In case you didn't know, it can also apply crowd control to the Acolytes as well. So essentially you press your 4, you shoot the crystal, and Acolyte simply blows up with guaranteed tier 3 crits. I cannot wait to test the augment as well. Last topics we're gonna touch on, Helmet version of Nourish is being nerfed, and Mirage's Eclipse. Ever since the Grendel rework, Nourish has been outstanding. Essentially, it's a must on most Warframes and most builds. You get your energy back and you get vital on your targets, which is absolutely insane. And you know what you need to do for that? Just activate one ability. Have a decent amount of duration, and that's pretty much it. It was strong, it was fantastic, and it is getting nerfed. Ooh. As for Mirage's Eclipse, this was more of a roller coaster. This discussion goes back a couple of years. It goes back before the helmet system was actually introduced into Warframe. So let me bring you up to speed. Mirage's Eclipse has two components, a damage mitigation component and a damage amplification component. Damage mitigation component is what most Tenno don't care about and seem to glance over. It goes up to 95%, 90% after the changes, if you stand in the shade or in the dark, and it has a visual effect on Mirage. The damage amplification component is what most Tenno care about. This is a multiplicative at the end effect. It's the most powerful weapon buffing ability in the game, and it only applies to weapons, unlike Roar. But the problem with it was the reliability. You see, if you stand in the light, you get the damage amplification, in the dark the mitigation, but because of all the light sources and shadow types in Warframe, you might get all of the damage buff, or some of it, or none of it, or you can stand in the shade and not get the mitigation that you needed, obviously making Eclipse highly unreliable. For years we've been asking for a solution to this, and the obvious solution for most of us was a toggle. 2 dev streams ago, Pablo comes out and says, hey, listen, we're gonna listen to your feedback, we're gonna make the ability more reliable. But if you want to toggle, because they knew we wanted to toggle, we're gonna have to nerf the ability. Now, from what I gather, most Tenno, myself included, were under the impression that just the helmet version of Eclipse would have been nerfed. So what did we do? Jump on the forums, vote for a toggle, because we've been asking that for years and years. Now fast forward to the next dev stream, as in this one, Pablo comes out and says, we're gonna give you the toggle that you wanted for Eclipse, but we are making the ability additive like Vex Armor instead of multiplicative. If you know anything about the damage system in Warframe, you know that's a pretty big nerf. Let's talk a bit about flat damage. A lot of Tenno are under the impression, falsely under the impression, that they don't need flat damage on their builds, and I've seen all sorts of builds which, God, doesn't matter. What does matter, you need to understand that flat damage is mandatory. It's not as sought after simply because there's a number of sources to achieve flat damage. From your weapon mods to your weapon arcanes to your Warframe arcanes, there are plenty of sources to get the flat damage on. It's mandatory, you need it, no questions about it, but there's plenty of ways to get it. Multiplicative at the end? Not that many ways to get it. You see, this is why Mirage's Eclipse was so powerful, and the multiplier, of course. So obviously a lot of us were like, oh, hold on there, you said you'd give us a toggle, but then you turn around, bait and switch us and just destroy the ability. We don't want a more powerful Vex Armor. So they kind of backtracked on that after the community's reaction, or most of the community's reaction, and said, okay, we're leaving it at multiplicative for Mirage. So in essence, Mirage is just getting a toggle and the 90% nerf from 95% damage reduction, which is not really all that big of a deal. But the helmet ability will only get you a 30% multiplicative buff, just like Roar. Now obviously Roar and Eclipse are not the same thing. Roar has its own advantages when it comes to damage, and since most of you guys only care about damage, Roar will still be the way to go because it does double dip, similar to how a faction mod double dips, and nobody seems to care about the damage mitigation that Eclipse can offer. So the community is still kind of pissed off that they didn't give a more hefty multiplier than 30% for the helmet version. For the time being, I'm just happy that Mirage is safe from the nerf and we are finally getting that toggle. As for the helmet ability, what can I tell you, my friends? Use Roar. And that's pretty much the long and short of it. Digital Extremes did point out that these numbers are subject to change, so they might still make changes to the ability, but they always say that, so take it with a pinch of salt. Oh, before I forget, in 2024 we are celebrating 11 years of Warframe, hopefully many more to come. And you know what that means, don't ya? You don't? Well, we are getting the Warframe yearly celebration, and that means access to fantastic items completely for free. I'm talking about from cosmetics such as fantastic skins. The Dex skin for Wisp is particularly fantastic. Oh, and the Excal skin as well. But you're also getting functional, powerful items like the Dex Dakra and the Dex Furis. And by the way, newer players, these items come with an Orokin Catalyst already installed and their own weapon slot, which essentially gets you on the way to just modding the weapons and having that star chart. Not only that, my friends, for us veterans of the game, we are getting a brand new weapon. It's a melee though, the Dex Nakana. So get ready for the Warframe yearly celebration. And that's pretty much gonna do it for the last dev stream recap. As always, my name is Lazer. Thank you guys so much for watching. Like the channel, subscribe only if you enjoy the content, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Bye.